No. Good evening, everybody. This is Simon Lewis here from the Holding Cell, and you are very welcome to a very, very special evening. We are delighted at the Holding Cell to be launching Mary Madec's third poetry collection, which I have here, which is here. Yes, the Egret lands with news from other parts, and I'm delighted to have received that in the post on Friday, and I've already got myself launched into it, and I'm really enjoying it so far. For those of you who have never tuned into the Holding Cell, well, you are tuned into the very, very final event that we're going to have. The Holding Cell set up in March, just the day after all of us were shut down and put into our own little holding cells, into quarantine, and hence myself and Roz decided that we realized we were going to be stuck not seeing any of our favorite writers and our performing in their live events. So we thought we would set up our own little private little place where writers from all over Ireland could read their work. And in the 2 months, the 8 weeks that we've been on, we have had over 60 of some of Ireland's best writers, and two of them are, you're looking at two of them right here, both Jessica Traynor and now Mary Madec is joining us on the Holding Cell just at the last minute. We are shutting up shop after tonight because tomorrow, as we all know, there's a little chink of light as the country is starting to open up, and we seem to be in a better situation than we might have thought we might have been, let's say, in the middle of March. I have no other purpose but to say a huge congratulations to Mary. I'm delighted that we've been able to do this, and this is our second foray into launching anything. We had a launch last week of John O'Donnell's short story collection, but we really enjoyed that. But this is our first poetry collection to launch. We might get used to this kind of thing, I don't know. So I wanted to just say to people, at a live poetry launch, generally, as we all know, if you've ever been to a poetry launch, that's in the real world, not in the virtual world, you're usually sitting in a lovely room somewhere. It could be a pub, it could be a hotel, it could be the headquarters of Poetry Ireland, and there's usually thousands of people in the room, so it can get very noisy, as you know. And whereas virtually, we don't know, we can't hear the crowds, and that can be a little bit disconcerting. So what we do have is to note to make sure that we know you're there, and we do know you're here. I can see there's only 50 people here, which is fantastic. Is that you can add comments to wish Mary well, and it's brilliant to see already that we have a couple of them. I'm just going to show you what they look like, and we have some people here saying hello, and we're delighted that you've joined us. There's just a couple of them there. So what I'm going to do is I am going to toast Mary's collection, because I think what we should do. The other thing at these poetry events is generally you don't have to bring your own wine, but in this case we have to. So I have my glass of wine ready to toast Mary for her. Jessica has her water. I hope Mary has her cup of coffee at this stage. No, a glass of water as well. I'm the only lush here. That's ridiculous. So congratulations to Mary, and I'm going to pass you on to Jessica, who is going to launch the collection.
Thanks so much for that, Simon, and a big thanks to Simon and Roz for doing this really important project of connecting people, which I think is what literature does. But we've really, really felt it, I think, in the past weeks, these opportunities to connect with each other, to see what people are doing, to feel that the world is continuing in spite of everything. And it's been such a pleasure to have the opportunity to read Mary's third wonderful collection, The Egret Lands with News from Other Parts. I've been a fan of Mary's work for a really long time, since I saw her, the two of us read together in Books Upstairs, I think back in 2015. And she's a really, really fantastic poet. And I'm just so privileged to be here to launch her wonderful third book. So with a doctorate in linguistics and an MA in Old English poetry, it's really not surprising that Mary Madec is sensitive to the subtleties of language, to its layers of history and meaning. Her 2014 collection, Demeter Does Not Remember, was an unflinching portrait of the complex mother-daughter relationship, imbuing the women in the myth with new agency and urgency. Now, in her third collection, The Egret Lands with News from Other Parts, Mary expands upon themes which have run through her work in a rich theme: mythology, history, place, and now the family too. These are poems of grace and clarity and of propulsive narrative drive. In the poem, Her Time Has Come to Go Under the Bridge, an Irish traveller's story of a birth is captured with arresting detail, along with the undertones of shame that attend this particular baby's journey into the world, where the girl rises from the waters like the Virgin of the Apocalypse, a really striking image that will stay with me for a really long time. They are also poems of vulnerability that tackle the sadness of aging and its sense of encroaching invisibility. And in one surreal but biting poem, a woman vanishes because of a new haircut, become the woman with the new haircut who was never seen again by her husband, who walked into the mirror and shattered it. In Amphitrite at Acklehead, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right, I'll have to check with Mary later, a goddess of blue seas is transmogrified from sea nymph as exquisite as a birch tree to a familiar, homely woman who sits opposite the speaker, sipping as if her tea were full of essential plankton. Mary's love of Old English poetry comes through here too, with poems such as The Wanderer, The Seafarer, and The Wife's Lament not only mentioned in the poems, but informing the timeless yet intimate atmosphere of this work. A love form is represented by a compelling sestina, but also in a wonderful palindrome poem, one of my favourites in the book, called Imagine, which is after The Wife's Lament from the Exeter book, where the heart of the wife's complaint is being banished from the scriptorium, a really apt sentiment for this book, which is so in love with knowledge and learning and information. This is a collection that opens windows into otherworldly spaces while keeping a keen weather eye out for everyday messengers, such as the egret in the collection's title. I'm so delighted to launch the Egret Lands with News from Other Parts. And now I'd like to welcome Mary herself to read some of these very, very fine poems.
Thank you very much, Jessica. It's always very humbling to be introduced by another writer, and that's what I feel today. And it's really lovely. It shows how much poetry is written to be a conversation. And yeah, you kind of opened my eyes to some things I didn't know I did. So thank you. I'd also like to thank Simon and Roz for the opportunity to be here on the holding cell. And I'm sure some of you have already tuned in and seen other people, well, John O'Donnell launched here, but other people reading. And I'm honoured to be the last reader for now, but I cannot see that a lovely platform like this would disappear. So I suppose I need to explain in some way my little obsession with the egret. Now, a lot of you may know that the egret is a migratory bird that arrived here from Africa. Now, I don't know a lot about that, but that was enough for me to know, because he's a bit like, the egret is a little bit like my husband Cunnill, who migrated from Africa and came back to Ireland. So it's this egret as a symbol is very important to me as a sign of hope and light, and especially for the time that, you know, that when things were not so good for me. So I'm going to read the title poem, which has a pretty long title, and that'll kind of put in context at least the background for a lot of these poems. The egret lands with news from other parts. I wish it were to a place emptied of memories, not caught in the gauze of those thin trees on the banks of a river which heaves until I'm up to my knees in its depths. The hill above, which I have walked so many times, leaves me once again breathless at the summit, as if it were the wrong road. What I didn't know then hops out like a harlequin from behind the hedges, mocks me on those lonely walks. The smell of gorse or woodbine in my nose, where I thought a sweet-scented world was consoling me, not telling me I'd make better memories somewhere else, in another world, from where the egret came, his cascade of white plumes flowing down as he stoops and dallies in the inlet, long enough for me to notice him, then raises to the span of his brilliant, majestic wings, the grey world receding, colour seeping through. Now, if I were to say something about this book overall from my work with it over the last few years, I would say that in many ways it's about appropriating history. My personal history as a woman in this culture, and as a woman also in this literary tradition. And I suppose Evan Boland's passing has brought us to reflect again, maybe, on these questions of where we fit, we women writers. And of course, we fit much better than we did, but it's still a complex identity. And that certainly was there in some of the poems that I wrote in this book. So I'm going to read, first of all, a poem called The Burden of History. And I think that's a backdrop to several poems that I write, especially at the beginning of the book. Because we all carry the burden of history in our lives, in our personal lives, and in our collective identity as well, as a people who have suffered so much in the past. And this poem is about the place where I grew up. I know there are some people watching from that place possibly, but also who will know the place, Gorthawarla. And it was a landscape with which, in which I moved very intimately for many years of my early life. And I roamed around in its splendid isolation, in a way a bit like I do now, since this pandemic started. And I didn't know the whole history of the place when I did that as a child. So in a way, my adult life has been about discovering the things I didn't fully understand, but there were hints of it there. And one of the hints was that one of the hills up the road that I walked was called John Hills. So I would ask my mother why that was John Hills and not John's Hill. And I never really got a very satisfactory answer. But then much later, I discovered that there was actually a member of parliament who lived in my village in the 19th century called John Hill. So John Hills was his place, which happened to be on the top of a hill. So here's the burden of history. I'd like to walk upon the earth without trampling on the history of my kin. So many roads are famine walks, and underneath the wild strawberry powdered bones, in the ditches. Behind grammatical mysteries like why John Hills was not John's Hill, a story of lives lost in time and struggles that came to nothing. The killing in the middle of the farm, and some mother, now long forgotten, who stood over it weeping. And in that inlet of my ancestors, where I stood in awe of the cottage garden, a girl looks back, witnesses a young woman raped by a neighbour. These booby traps in the ground, on the ready to detonate, and every step I take an expiation. Even if one is no more guilty than being alive, and being alive in danger of remembering in one's bones too much sorrow. Now, the next poem I'm going to read focuses more on how we make history. We are all in the process of making history. We live in time. And this has a challenge for us as well as a burden. And it's about, we all have the challenge about how we appropriate history constantly in our personal lives and how that is influenced by the culture we live in. And in terms of writing, how it influences what I'm allowed to write about and how these subjects are valued. And of course, again, if we return to Evan Boland, we know that, domestic themes and themes about our lives in interiors and in relationships maybe was less valued as expressed by women. And so I think that process is a painful process. It's a process. Creation is not an easy thing, and becoming ourselves is not an easy thing. And again, to me, the image which came for the transitional phase of this was a bird. And sometimes we have to say goodbye to the past and move on. And that's a very hard process. So this poem is about a particular situation in my life, but it's also about that kind of transition. Fragile. I stand in the kitchen saying goodbye to the house I have lived in, mother and lover, where I see a song thrush, dead at the door of the sun lounge, stunned forever by the clarity of glass. I look at his small, frail body, his speckled chest, but most of all at his two spindle legs, limply clinging to air, as if there could be something they could grab to stop the folding of this fragile life back into the earth. Now, those of you who have read my poetry before will know that I have a few perennial themes. And two of those themes are the death of my father and my life as a twin to a person with severe autism. Now, I think that, again, these are about history and appropriating history because they're really experiences recovered from the consciousness of a young girl who was me. So I'm looking at the perspective of my father's death as it was then and as I see it now. And these poems, the ones that occur in this book, which I'm not going to read, I think, because I won't have time, are really, they're probably happier. It took me a long time to get there, but here I am. on those. And what I will read for you are some poems about a longish poem about my brother, because I think that that's maybe less represented in literature and poetry. And it's also a very challenging experience to do that well, because I want to honor my brother and he's non-verbal. And so I'm talking for him in some way. And the backdrop to this poem that I wrote, that I'm going to read for you now, is Keats's poem, Endymion. Now, that poem wasn't maybe super highly regarded in its time, although I can't see how you wouldn't love all Keats's poems. But even at that, one of the lines everyone knows from Keats is, "A thing of beauty is a joy forever." And that's kind of at the base of this poem. And it's connected to the Greek myth of Endymion, where Selene, the goddess of the moon, falls in love with this timeless youth. And for me, there's something haunting about the silence of my brother, and who lives at the edge of my dreams, and with whom I communicate, but not in a usual way. And so I am, in this poem, I'm kind of looking back and forward with that and trying to explore its meaning for both our lives, if that's not too grand an ambition for me. So this poem is called Twins Still. In the garden, soil streams through his man hands in gaps of awkwardness as we plant the future. Sad and frustrated, I try to decode the raucous vowels of his misapprehension, the high pitch of his fears. I think I am the unsealer of his soul. I want to fuse him to reality, rouse Endymion from a sleeping cave. But he lives without the symbols I know, the strawberry moon swelling the sky above us, speaking to Saturn. It seems to me that he believes in speleology, divining by well-rehearsed rituals the nature of things, putting a jinx on what happens, offering gestures, mind games to anchor us in the kitchen, wearing my apron as a ritual robe, looking up to heaven before he places in the drain grid with apt reverence the precious metals of the earth, a screw or tack. He twirls before he goes back through the great doorways of the house and visits the rooms of our living, a stickler for ceremonies of feeding, rest, ablutions. And when the music is playing between us, the exquisite pleasure, more beautiful than even I have words for, as memories and feelings weave through the silence, like the ancient tides of Endymion, the blood of our pulse, and the music is playing between us. He has arrived, like me, as accurately as if a tuning fork had set his course, pitch perfect, and to his delight I come with an old refrain, making words in my mouth for him, and spewing them like molten gold. Our loveliness increases and will never pass to nothingness. The little parable of our twins out. Finally, I would like to read, well, I have two poems. I'll read this is the penultimate poem. And again, it's really on the theme of history, but history somehow looking also to the future, and history as it connects, well, for me, into the next generation. And it's a poem that I wrote after an experience with my niece and nephew, and I brought them to visit my father's grave. And it was amazing for me to see how they connected with that, and very moving. It's called About a Heart and Its Ancestry. 2 grandchildren at my father's grave, who have never met him, contemplating death. Afraid of it, like one fears the depths of the ocean on the shore. I ask them what they are thinking, and their eyes fill with tears. I hold them, helpless from grief, the wound of absence, over all those years felt again, a growing pain in a new generation. And finally, I'd like to read the other bookend, which is an Egret poem again. And again, it does have the theme of history, because it alludes to some of our new visitors, people who have come to live among us, and also to I don't know if any of you know what an erratic is, but an erratic is a stone deposited on the limestone burn, which is not made of limestone, it's made of granite, and it was dragged along in the Ice Age. And it looks out of place, but actually it often is a very crucial stone in some of the walls around here. And lots of you have heard of the Flaggy Shore, probably because of Seamus Heaney's poem, but maybe also you've been here to visit. And if you haven't, maybe you'll come to visit at some time in the future. Egrets on the Flaggy Shore. The stunning white backs against the dark wrack of the foreshore. The delicate, studied steps as they pick through the depths down to the rocks. Exotic and strange, this dash of white on the darks and greys in the fading light of an Irish winter. As beautiful as a Syrian after rain, her skin golden, glistening. As beautiful as an erratic in the wall, fitting there like a cornerstone, knowing this place can be its home. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining me on this Facebook Live and for all the comments, lovely comments. Simon has been telling me some of them. And if you can at all, please support my publisher, Salmon Poetry, and buy the book. Thank you.
My mic was muted, so you didn't hear the first bit of that. Sorry about that. I was just saying congratulations, Mary. That was absolutely wonderful. I really, really enjoyed listening to those poems. I've read the first section, and it was lovely just to hear them in your voice as well. So it was just a real treat for me, and I'm sure
we're off air now.
No, we're not.
What's that?
We're not off air.
You are on. You're on.
Okay.
And there are 66 people looking at us right now.
Oh, well, thank you, everybody.
And they are equally as impressed as I am. And I'm just going to read out some of the comments from them just to show you the well wishings, because I think when it comes to a virtual launch, although it does feel like we're sitting in a room together, myself, Jessica, Mary, we can't see any of the people out there, so it can feel a little bit disconcerting. So what I think it's nice just to share some of the things that people are saying, because everybody's sort of in a virtual room together, and sometimes it's nice just to hear what people have to say, because this is kind of like, I suppose, in a real launch, when you're about to sign your book for everybody, they're queuing up and they're about to say something to you. So these are some of the comments from some of your friends and fans and everyone else. So I'll just put them up. Christina O'Dowd, brilliant as well as beautiful and brave. Bravo, Mary. We have Gillian. Congratulations, Mary. You're some woman. Let's see who we have. Maeve O'Toole. Congratulations, Mary. And we have Gina Spielman-Naughton. Congratulations, Mary, very proud of you. And Emily Cullen, well done. Jess, for your upward. So you're in on it too, Jess.
She deserves it.
There we go. Tanya Farrelly, congratulations, Mary. And a special one here from Siobhan, one of your publishers. Your publisher there's Jessie, and
thank you, guys.
Your publisher Mary. Morris Devitt, another poet, congratulations.
Yeah,
Ori Donaldson also wishing congratulations. Yvonne Dunn.
Wow.
Liz as well, and Jessie herself. Wonderful, Mary. So lovely to see both of them tuning in. I had asked them to one of them to come on to wish you well, but I don't know. Maybe they're in their pajamas or something like that. I'm in my pajamas. I mean, what different? I'm not actually in my pajamas. I'm joking. Who else do we have?
Thanks everyone for those lovely comments.
Vicky Donnelly there. Olive Mills, and an old friend of yours, Breda Joyce.
Yeah, Breda is a writer herself. Thank you, Breda.
Very good.
And a good writer.
Excellent. Helen
Dillon. Oh, yeah, okay.
And the last one I have here is Amanda Dillon. So well done. And and Jessie has said yes, she's in her PJs. Listen, Mary, thank you so much for entrusting myself and Roz. Roz is here in the background. She is also in her pajamas, so she is refusing to come on screen. And well, I just want to say thank you for entrusting us to help you with the launch of your third book. It's been a real honor for us. And thank you also, Jessica, for being here to launch the book too. It's just wonderful, Mary.
Well, thank you very much to both of you. I mean, you put in a lot of work, and thank you, Jessica, for those amazing words. I'll be able to cheer myself up now, thinking that this young, talented Dublin poet thinks I'm a good writer.
There you go. And a not so young Dublin poet also thinks you're a great. You're a great.
And actually, thank you, Simon. It's lovely, actually, for connection. You know, you're right, Jessica, about that. I think it's so important and weirdly personable, which is lovely. You know, yeah, I mean, we are all living in our own little bubbles now, all over the place, and it makes a big difference when we connect.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
Really
so
is.
I cannot see this disappearing, Simon.
But no, well, look, if somebody
else to call it something else other than the holding cell, maybe.
Yeah, our arm is willing to be twisted, I'd imagine. We're
both chamber.
So we will see what we can do. But what I will do is, I guess it leaves nothing left for me to do but to.
My husband wants to say hello.
Oh, sure.
Mary has described me as a neurotic from Africa.
Very good.
She did. She said this. Oh no, it wasn't the erratic. It was
an egret.
It was an egret from Africa. Yes. But I did come back. Yeah.
He came back.
Very good. Very.
I bet the fiction writers behave themselves much better when they're on.
Tell you, they're a different challenge altogether, to be honest. Not at all. Listen, thank you so much
again to everyone who tuned in. You know, that was amazing. So
and they're all still hanging around, which is great to see. I better close up shop for the evening, and thank you once again, Mary and to Jessica, for joining the Holding Cell for our final event. It's been a wonderful 8 weeks for the Holding Cell, and it's wonderful that we can finish it in such a lovely way. It's been just a really, really lovely evening. Thank you to everybody for joining us tonight and over the last 8 weeks. Our website, theholdingcell.eu, will remain online, so you can look back and watch any of our 60 plus writers, everyone from Jessica and now Mary and everyone in between are there and ready to be watched live from their holding cells. Thank you again, and we'll say good night. All the best.
thank you, everybody. Good night.
Take care.